All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Ultimate Punching Channel. Today, I've got a legendary Canadian announcer with us, Don Andrews, who recently told me that he's celebrating 20 years as a ring announcer at the front end of combat sports in Canada. And I wanted to talk to him a little bit today. So thank you all for stopping by. Welcome, and thank you for agreeing to come on the channel.
Thanks for having me. 20 years is next year. 2025.
Next year? Okay, well, pretty close. We'll round up in the math world, right?
We're all good. 20 years. Yes, 20 years next year. It'll be 2005. I got started, so.
Okay, well, I guess the first question I have is, how did you get started, right? I don't think there's sort of a career path or a college to go to become a ring announcer. So how did that happen?
There's definitely no college and there's definitely no courses for this. I'm still in contact with the guy. His name is Paul Lazenby. And Paul Lazenby is the reason why I do what I do. If you're a Canadian MMA fan and you know Paul's a former Canadian heavyweight Muay Thai champion. Stunt man, he's a fantastic guy. I love Paul to pieces. And Paul really got me started. I met Paul one day when I was working at a business where I was doing some duplications and some video stuff. And this enormous man came in and put this videotape on the counter and slid it down in front of me and said, "Make some copies of this for me." And I said, "Sir, yes, sir." He's a big guy. He's a big guy. Mm-hmm. And when I met him, he was pretty much at his peak, 20 years ago now. And I just let him know that it was something I was really interested in doing this. I was really interested in being a ring announcer. If the opportunity ever came up, here's my phone number. Don't forget to call me. And my phone rang. And Paul called me about 2 months later. And it was a really short conversation. He said, "Do you have a passport?" And I said, "Yeah, I have a passport." He said, "Good, because you work for Bodog now."
Okay.
And that was my answer. Oh, okay.
Okay.
And we went to about 2 weeks later, maybe 3 weeks later after that, all the paperwork was done, and they flew me to New Jersey to do a Bodog show.
Okay. And what did that entail? What kind of fight was that?
Dude, it was so crazy. So if you really go back to it, it's the night that Jorge Masvidal head kicked Eve Edwards, and he knocked him out but broke his foot on the same night.
Okay.
Trevor Prangley was a part of that. Eve Edwards, Yuki Kondo. Who else? Dude, there was so many great names on that card. On that, Dan Ring was on that card. Yeah, it was fantastic. Oh, Eddie Alvarez. Eddie Alvarez.
Okay. Yeah.
That was the first night I met Jorge Masvidal.
Okay. And what's he like? Is he like you met him? Obviously, probably wasn't super long a meeting. I don't really know, but what was he like? Is he the same kind of on stage versus kind of backstage, or is it kind of a persona that he puts on? Like, what was your impression?
I didn't really get a whole lot of time with him. I got to meet him really quickly and said, "I'm super stoked to introduce you," sort of thing. He was still getting started too. He was still in the backyards, and he was still, really just getting himself established at that point. So he fared very well that night, obviously.
Yeah.
And that kind of set him on his trajectory.
I don't know if that was the same one. Like, I've heard Chael Sonnen talk about the first time he met Jorge Masvidal, right? And he said he was like beating up some guy in the cage and also chatting with one of the ring girls, being like, "Hey, can I get your number?" Was it similar in that event, or what was that like?
No, this is really straightforward. He came in, he had work to do. I mean, again, he was up against a guy like Eve Edwards, who was really good at the time. He was again, two guys that were really in their prime. So, or at least for Masvidal, he was really starting to get his feet wet, and he was really starting to establish himself. Eve Edwards had already had a few fights at that point, but really brief. Like, I had a really brief interaction with him. And introduced him and saw him afterwards, as he was kind of getting wheeled out with a cast on his foot. So it was pretty short lived. But I met the same night I met Chael Sonnen. Chael Sonnen seems to be the same guy that I met 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So one thing I would ask you, like, you get started. This is like your first day. How do you prepare to go in there and be a ring announcer? Is there some type of rehearsal? Do you is there a series of things that you go through to like be ready to announce a fight? Take me through that process.
So I had done a few fights prior to this. I was lucky that I'd done a few fights here in Vancouver and in around BC and stuff. So I had the experience. I'm a big fan. I've been a big fan of guys like Jimmy Lennon Sr., Jimmy Lennon Jr., Michael Buffer, Bruce Buffer, all of those guys all the way along.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted to do it. And when the opportunity presented itself, I knew that I just had to make sure that I knew the information was right. I grew up watching boxing. And
Right.
so I knew the process. I knew what was expected of me if it was my job to do. Just wanted to make sure that I got the names right, I got the information right, that I was excited, that I brought a little bit of energy to the show, that sort of thing. So there's no real process. Like there's much more of a process now.
Mhm.
There's preparation time. You can do your homework. 20 years ago, when I first started this, I was reading names off a piece of paper. You know what I mean? I
Right.
got some information. I knew Jorge Masvidal. I knew Eve Edwards. I knew who these guys were. I had a bit of information for them. So when it came time to do my job, I just simply stepped up, did what I was supposed to do, and got out of the way as quickly as possible.
Okay. And I guess it might have been like, I mean, there's still internet back then, of course, right? But
Oh,
probably not as quick as it is now, right? So it's probably a lot easier to find the information you need about like different fighters now than it would have been, back then, right?
yeah, there weren't things like Tapology and all of those the good websites, like SureDog and stuff like that. Those guys just didn't exist back in the day. So you had to
Yeah.
really dig around. You had to actually call people and contact people and reach out to people. Now I can find all the information I need in 25 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. That totally makes sense. So, one of the things I wanted to ask you is you've been doing this for 19 years. Is there an event or, an evening where you were the ringing announcer that was kind of the most memorable that sticks out in your mind above all others?
That's a tough one. One of the first ones I ever did was pretty awesome. The very first show that I did in New Jersey, that's where we did that Bodog show, was in New
Yeah.
Jersey. But I really think that the one that sticks out for me the most, the one that really kind of is etched in my brain, I worked for World Series of Fighting Global,
Okay.
and we went to Japan, and we did a show in a venue just outside the Tokyo Dome in Japan. And if you're familiar with the Tokyo Dome, it has a pretty awesome history. It's got an amazing history. And we went into this really cool venue where you had to take an elevator down a couple of floors. And
Mhm.
we went into this giant kind of auditorium room, and there were just rows and rows of um, balconies all around this room, balcony after balcony, rows and rows and rows and rows of balcony. So if you didn't sit on the floor, your balcony seats were these amazing vantage point right away. And it was really, really neat because North American mixed martial arts is a lot different than mixed martial arts in places like Japan and the Philippines and in and around Asia and stuff like that. I introduced the first fighter, and the fight started, and I've never heard the room quieter in my life.
Interesting.
The room came to an almost pin drop quiet. It was crazy, but it's the respect that goes along with it. They were a part of it. They wanted to see it. They wanted to be in it. It was the beginning of the evening too, so they're a little different than we are in North America. They kind of build up to it, and as we
Right.
got to that, as we got to the main event, the place got busier, crazier, louder, and more involved. But from the very onset, it was really strange because I said a whole bunch of stuff, and then nobody said anything. It was really weird.
Interesting. Yeah, I've actually heard that before. I don't know. I don't remember who told me this, but somebody else has said that like watching combat sports in Japan, it's like radio silence, as they say.
Yeah,
It's a lot more kind of respectful and different things like that in the beginning, depending on how you define it, right?
yeah,
Um,
for sure.
the other thing I wanted to ask you is if you could like dream fight announcement, if you could be the cage announcer for like a dream event in your mind, like what would that be?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. You know what it is everybody always wants to be there for the next biggest fight. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Would I
Yeah.
love to be there to introduce Jake Paul and Mike Tyson? Absolutely, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, there are certain matchups that I see that I would surely love to be a part of. Um, I'm realistic, and I understand that my opportunity to work for the UFC is very limited, if anything at all. So the
Mhm.
opportunities that are going to come to me are going to be opportunities that I can help present myself, or organizations within North America can kind of offer to me. So it'll really, like, if I had to think of a dream one, like really a dream
Mhm.
matchup, maybe, geez, I don't even know. That's such a tough one. That's such a tough one, because that makes me have to define two fighters that I would love to see in the
Yeah.
ring, right? And
Yeah.
I think about it, and I'm like, well, there's tons of people. Like, I'd love to see Pereira. I'd love to introduce McGregor in his prime, and
Yeah.
But I've been really fortunate to be able to introduce a handful of really great fighters already at this point in my career,
Yeah.
and they also hold that weight for me. They really do. There are
Yeah.
certain Akihiro Gono. I introduced Akihiro Gono in Japan.
Yeah.
That man's a legend in this business, and like, if you know anything about the sport, you know how much he's put into it, and how far he came.
Mhm.
And to introduce the Magic Man was just like so surreal. Things like that. When I first started out, Trevor Prangley, um, Eve Edwards, Jorge Masvidal, um, Chael Sonnen, Nick Ring. Again, Megumi Fuji, Tara LaRosa. Just trying to go through the list. I've got it in my phone, but the amount of amazing people that I got to introduce in the first few months of my career still hold weight for me 20 years later.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I could see that, right? And especially in that sort of first one that you did, right? You don't know how big some of those names end up becoming, right? I mean, some of them were
Right.
really big for the time, right? But Jorge Masvidal, like, who would have known at the time that he would be, at a certain point, he was the second biggest name in MMA after Conor McGregor, right? Like that,
Right.
you just don't know where they're going to be, and like, I've looked back at some cards where they show some people on the undercard. I'm like, wow, this was an incredible card, but we didn't know how good these people were back then, right?
It's true. It's really true. You see the undercard, and all of a sudden you're like, that guy is now a main event, big
Yeah.
ticket holder, right? Yeah.
So one of the other questions I had for you is, uh, Canadian MMA, like, how have you seen sort of the sport evolve and grow compared to where it was when you first started?
Well, I'm going to give props to Sunny Serene right now, of course. I work for Unified, and I've
Yeah.
been fortunate to work for pretty much every organization across this country. Sunny's really doing a great job of making sure that Canadian MMA gets the platform that it needs. It's on UFC Fight Pass.
Mm-hmm.
And he's even drawing up American fighters to try and draw in that American audience.
Yeah.
The UFC broke records on the weekend in Edmonton. $3.6 million ticket at the door. That was
Yeah.
that was their that was their profit at the door.
Yeah.
And they broke records in North America. It's because
Yeah.
Edmonton is such a great fight town. Unified has done a really good job of propping up those fighters, giving them that platform, making sure that people know who they are, and doing their best to push them towards the next level, whether it be UFC, whether it be LFA, whether it be whatever the next step might be for them. Sunny
Yeah.
and Unified have done a really great job. Sunny's also expanding across Canada, which really helps
Yeah.
the Unified brand, which is also helping draw a lot of interest across the country in different provinces. Their eyeballs are on organizations that aren't necessarily getting the eyeballs they need.
Mm-hmm. Well, so
So
I mean, like, I'm a big fan of MMA. I had Bronson Craig on here not too long ago, and he won his fight right after the interview with me. I don't know if it's
nice.
the channel or not. You never know, right? But no, I'm kidding.
Always,
But
always the channel.
sorry.
It's always the channel.
Yeah, it's the channel. The channel is what does the magic. But yeah, I went to UFC Edmonton. The crowd was incredible. The energy was incredible. And like, I am looking to go to a Unified event. I'm hoping, Sonny, if you ever see this, come to Winnipeg. There's a good fight crowd here as well.
For sure.
So I would absolutely love there to be some MMA that goes on here in Winnipeg. But I also had even the expansion of women's MMA. It's blowing up. I had a couple of female fighters on here, and they were saying like when they first got started, it was completely empty, but now their gyms are just full of women who are wanting to like compete and learn and all that other kind of stuff.
Right. Because there's lots of really great Canadian fighters that are showing that this is something that they can really accomplish. This isn't something that's just left to a small percentage of these, really high-end athletes. You can have low, and I use the term kind of lightly, but you can have lower level fighters that still have that same passion, right? As long as there's some avenues for them, they'll keep showing up.
Yeah, it is incredible. So I know I saw on your profile that you also have done some stuff for the CFL and just outside of the ring. What kind of stuff did that entail?
Sir, I work for everybody. I've worked in the CFL for almost 13 years now. I work for the BC Lions. I work in Major League Soccer. I work for the Whitecaps. I am fortunate enough to be the PA announcer at BC Place for Rugby Sevens.
Okay.
Canada Soccer. Pretty much anything that goes on at BC Place, I'm very fortunate that I get a call and I get to go do that sort of stuff. So,
okay, what do you find like? Because obviously MMA, it doesn't have quite the history of football, hockey, soccer, those type of things, right? How do you see kind of like MMA, if at all, kind of catching up to some of the other sports that are out there? Do you see that happening at all?
it'll take time. Yeah. I think there's definitely an opportunity for MMA to catch up to mainstream sports for sure. MMA is really putting themselves in a spot to be considered mainstream sports now. Larger platforms are picking them up. You're starting to see them on regular television and stuff like that. More organizations would be good. Better, deeper talent pools are always good. We don't always necessarily need one organization kind of under the umbrella. So it would be nice to see some other organizations. But I mean, as far as the history is concerned, they need to grow. There's lots of growth that still needs to go. There's a great community that's behind the MMA organizations and the MMA world, and it's not going away anywhere or anytime soon. We're 20 or 25 years into this, where the general public has got better knowledge of what the UFC is. You find people a lot less often say, "Oh, you work in the UFC," and instead they'll say, "Oh, you work in mixed martial arts."
Yeah.
Because they've come to realize that it's a branding thing. It's like Kleenex, it's like plexiglass, it's like, that sort of thing. They branded themselves really, really well. If they continue on the trajectory that they're on, then absolutely. I mean, other mainstream sports have got 50, 60, 70 years of history already. So there's a lot of work to be done. But there's such a strong community here, and the support is definitely here. There's no issue about the support. Again, Edmonton just proved it, right? They literally just showed up, put a show on, and the people that want to be there will show up, and they did. They absolutely did. Good on you, Edmonton. Good on you.
Yeah, it was great. Like I flew to Edmonton just to watch it, right? Because like I'm such a big fan, and like I definitely want to come to a live Unified event as well. Like I watch, I catch it on TV as well, just because I love to see the Canadian talent that's out there, right? But one of my sort of criticisms, I think that for the sport to grow to the next level, I think there needs to be a level of standardization with the UFC and with other sports, in the sense that a lot of times, Dana kind of picks and chooses who gets the next title shot here and there, sure. which obviously, like, pay-per-views, he needs to make money. Like, I get it, right? At the same time, right, the BC Lions would go to the Grey Cup, whether they scored 7 points more than their opponent or 70 points more than their opponent.
Right.
Like, if they put on a boring football game, they're still going to the Grey Cup either way, right? Yeah. And I think some level of standardization, like if you beat 4 guys in your division, then you can challenge up a weight class, something like that. Like every single time to kind of follow.
Great idea.
Script.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. Actually, I agree. There needs to be enough growth for all levels. right? And
Mhm.
I think your idea there that's an excellent idea to help with progression and moving things forward and moving people in through divisions and keeping the people fresh, for sure.
Yeah. And one of the other things, so Sonny, and I'm hoping one day I could get him on here to ask him how he's kind of bringing up unified MMA and like the growth of the Canadian landscape. But I wanted to ask you, what
Yep.
have you seen from like Canadian fighters? There's sort of this thing that's kind of going on right now, the conversation that GSP was the best, and since then we haven't really seen much in the way of talent, right? What do you
Okay.
think about that statement?
Well, you can talk to guys like Eamon Zahabi and Mike Malott, who just fought, Jasmine Jasudavicius, and Jamie Lynn Horth. And I think those four people alone would put up a good argument, really.
Mhm.
It's like anything else. Everything is kind of cyclical. Maybe it's a 10-year thing in MMA. I don't know, but there are waves that go with it, right? You know what I mean? Yes, GSP was surely one of the greatest Canadian mixed martial artists that we're ever going to see. Absolutely,
Mhm.
he's 1%. And
Yeah.
you know that 1% is still out there. You know someone else is out there trying to put themselves in that 1% spot too.
Mhm.
So I'm sure that the next person is out there. I mean, Eamon Zahabi, he just got he just put himself in a spot to be ranked 15th
Yeah.
bantamweight. That's
Yeah.
fantastic for him. That's amazing. And he put on a performance against Munoz. That's
Yeah.
no slouch. You know, you're
Yeah.
fighting a pro guy. You are fighting a veteran guy, and he handled business really, really well. So I
He
think
looked incredible.
Charles Jourdain, Eamon Zahabi, all of those guys, they look like the future of Canadian mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Bantamweights, featherweights. I'd love to see some heavyweights step up. I'd really love to see some new Canadian heavyweights step up. See some really big boys really come out and take on the division.
Yeah, I do remember that like Tanner Bozier, who he does train out of Edmonton with the Shave Bears.
The Bears.
That's where Bronson Craig trains. Yeah, he was in the UFC for a little bit, and I've heard that he's trying to maybe get back in there or something like that. But like, yeah, I would love to see that too.
Absolutely. Tanner's a beast.
Yeah.
Great guy. Great guy. Love to see him. Love to see him competing again and winning again and really putting the division on notice for sure.
And one of the other things I wanted to just ask you, and this is 20 years in the sport, you probably have some
Yep.
insight into this. Where do you see? Do you ever see anything like mixed martial arts, jujitsu, anything like that, getting to be sort of an international thing, like in the Olympics, anything like that, or is it a little bit too brutal for that type of thing?
Yeah, I think more controlled things like judo's already in the Olympics, and that's
Yeah,
much more of a controlled thing. I think that the world isn't really ready for the striking yet. I
yeah,
think that's that really thing to me seems to be like the biggest hurdle. I think as far as mainstream is concerned, um, this is not for everyone. This sport is not for everyone. We all know this, and
yeah.
those that like it, we really like it, and those that don't are they have a different opinion. They just
Mhm.
totally have a different opinion of it. Um, could it make the Olympics? Yeah, yeah, but I don't see how that would be measured
Mhm.
on the same scale as you would measure like judo or jujitsu
Yeah,
or some sort of grappling thing like that. You could measure that and you could pit two people against each other.
yeah.
I just wonder how they would be able to do real combat, like real hand-to-hand combat in the Olympics. I think would have
Yeah.
a really hard time.
Yeah, well, because the thing is, right, like they've only got 2 weeks, right? So,
Yeah,
how many countries would compete and how many fights in a row could you do, right? Like, then you kind of be going back to the old days of like kickboxing and MMA where people are fighting like 2, 3 people in one night, right? Which like
right.
none of the commissions sanction anymore, right?
No. You guys get hurt.
Yeah.
People really do get hurt when that happens. When you're asking someone to do something multiple times an evening, you're setting yourself up for failure for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So one more thing I wanted to sort of ask, we're coming to the end of the 30 minutes, is
Yep.
legacy, right? Like you're kind of the voice of Canadian MMA and you've done a whole bunch of other shows, right? One of the, coming up on 20 years, how do you want the Canadian MMA fans and maybe MMA fans in general to remember the work that you've put in service of this sport?
Really just want them to know that my purpose was to make sure that everybody got the introduction that they deserved. Didn't matter if you were a 1-5 fighter, didn't matter if you were a 15-1 fighter. It was always the same for me. I realized at a very young age, I wasn't a big fan of being punched in the face. I came to terms with that at an early age. And I just really wanted to make my mark on this business. And I hope that people will remember a passion, a dedication, really, and just really love. Like, I just love this. The people that I've met are incredibly great. And I think that's a part of what a lot of people miss with this industry and with this business. We see two people put on gloves and we see two people locked inside a cage and we see the two of them go to war. Yeah. However it may be. People get knocked out, people get tapped out, whatever it might be. I just really want people to know that no matter who you were, no matter what level you were at, it was always the same for me. I always had the same respect for that person. I always had the same admiration for these people. It's really something to go and do this and stand up against another human being and test yourself. It's just my hat is off to every single person that's ever stepped inside the cage and really proven themselves. Like it's difficult to prove yourself on a scale like that. Do you know what I mean? There's no hiding.
Oh, right? Absolutely. Like everything is on the line. You show the world everything that like everything about you right then and there, right? And like I just don't. One of the things that I personally don't understand is how anybody can disrespect someone who goes into the cage basically for our entertainment, right? Like they're doing it for themselves as well, right? Because I know myself, I would never ever do that, right? But I'll watch it because I have just this like up here level of respect for anybody who's willing to put themselves on the line like that.
Absolutely. 100%. Somebody asked me one day, they said, what's the most intense thing about it? And I said, really honestly, standing there, usually for a main event, it's usually when it's at its peak, standing there at a main event, hold a microphone between two really intense human beings. And you don't have to be huge. You can be 5'5". You can be 6'3". It makes no difference. The intensity is always the same.
Yeah.
And that moment right there just fuels me every time.
Yeah, it really is something. It really is something special, and I only see it growing. Right, like more and more people are loving the sport. More and more people are training.
And this is the thing: is it comes from the heart for me. I really love this sport. I love the people. The organizations have been great to me for almost 20 years now. It's providing me with a platform to do what I love, just the same as it's providing fighters a platform to do what they love. So yeah, it's heartfelt. You know, it really does mean something to me to be able to introduce someone. The fist bumps, those go so far. The smiles, when you see somebody smile, when you see somebody excited that you've said their name, or you've said their name properly, or you put them in that headspace. It's the best moment.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Well, we're just about at the end of our time here. I really want to thank you for doing this. I truly appreciate it. I don't know if you have any pull with Sonny or those guys, but maybe you can put in a good word to bring them to Winnipeg. I'd love to see Unified in Winnipeg.
Sonny, we got to go to Winnipeg. We got to go to Winnipeg.
It needs to happen. I would love it. But then the other thing I just want to say, like, is there anything else that you have going on that I can kind of promote on this channel, right? Any ventures, any ways that people can get in contact with you, anything that else going on in that space?
I really appreciate, first of all, I appreciate you taking the time to do this with me. You know that I appreciate telling my story. I love telling this story every time because I have a very unique job. And not everybody gets to do this. So I really understand that part of it. Promoting, not really. I mean, again, please follow on social media. Make sure that you're supporting Unified. When you see us on UFC Fight Pass, buy the show. Yeah, support the fighters, buy the show, buy the merch, be there live and in person, come over and say hello, shake my hand, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, no, just thank you again for the platform. Thanks for giving us an opportunity to tell a story.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate it. That's it for me, guys. Don't forget, like, subscribe, and we will be back on Thursday with one of the elite karate combat fighters to hear his story. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks.
All right. That's it. Thank you.